everybody, and thank you for taking the time to be part of this talk. Uh, as you can see, the title is sort of quite different from all the presentations that are taking place right now in the conference. And the reason of this title is the picture that you can see on the screen. And this title did not just, I didn't pick it up out of a hat or something. This title came up, during my doctoral research, and I will talk more about it as we go along. And then, this question is more asked by the students when they look at traditional teachers like the one in the picture. What you see in the picture is an old style, old school, traditional, typical teacher, the sage on the stage, the most intelligent person in the class, the most knowledgeable, the end of all knowledge, whose only duty is to light a candle and then pour that knowledge, whatever is in that bucket, to pour that knowledge into the empty buckets, so-called empty buckets of the students. And you can see that very well. That is what is happening. But then in today's world, when the students have technology, they have the so-called knowledge on their fingertips and in the palm of their hand. They have the right to ask this question from this type of a teacher: why do we need teachers? And I'll try and answer that question as we go along, and I'll make some profound statements as we go along. So can we have the poll question, please?
Yes, sure. And the question is, what percentage of instructors in higher education still believe in being the sage on the stage required to transfer knowledge from one bucket to another, as shown in the previous slide? Okay, Dr. Bhatty, 64% and 64% of the audience have answered 50%.
Okay. Now, I was assuming that is what the answer would be. But you'll be surprised to know that almost 75% of the teachers, and let me go further, almost 75% of the teachers still believe, even in higher education, that their duty is a 9-to-5 job. Teaching is not a vocation, it is just a job. And their job finishes once they believe that they have transferred the knowledge that they were supposed to transfer from their bucket into the other bucket. Very surprising, very sad, but very true. Now, all this, what I'm going to talk about is based on my 43 years of experience, not all in academia, in project management, corporate sector, training, coaching, curriculum design and, training courses and all that. And my dissertation, which was not very long ago, 2017, I started my dissertation, Impact of Teaching Presence on Learning Outcomes, a qualitative study of perception through the lens of online teachers. And the reason I say this is, you'll see as we go along as to why it is important that you know the title of my research. And by the way, this research is also available on Procast in case you are interested. And I suggest that you should take a look at it because it has two unique features. One unique feature is that most research on teachers' presence has been done from the student's perspective. Very strange, because it is a teacher who is supposed to create the teaching presence, but the research has all been done. When I say all, I mean almost 90% from the student's perspective. So I thought it's time to have a teacher's perspective. Again, surprisingly, 95% of all research on teaching presence is quantitative. Now, teaching presence is a state of mind. Teaching presence is in here. how can you really find out in depth about what the teacher is thinking if you do not do qualitative research? So that is why I went for qualitative research, and that is why this research is unique in more than one way. So, and a lot of what I talk about is from the research, and then, as I said, part of my 43 years of life. In fact, now 45 or 47 years of practical life. The question right now, the question in question, is basically dependent also on the pedagogical style, and it also depends on what pedagogy is being adopted. Now, see, in my times when I was growing up, back in the 60s or early 70s, in higher education, the fact that somebody was a teacher, was a professor, was good enough for me to respect that person for life. I was not going to challenge him. I was not going to, find out if he knew something or not. He did not know something. The fact that he was appointed as my professor was good enough for me back in the 60s, early 70s. Today, in this dynamic world, in this modern world of technology and dynamism and fast speed, students need a reason to respect their teacher. Now, their reason, especially in a face-to-face, could be personality, charisma, or that reason could be such depth of knowledge that the student know that they will drown in it. But this becomes more difficult when you are doing an online asynchronous pedagogy. Because then the charisma is out, and depth of knowledge, there's only so much depth of knowledge that you can really share in an asynchronous pedagogy. So there, it's a totally different ballgame. So the questions which are asked by the students about why do I need a teacher are different when it is on a face-to-face class than when it is an asynchronous class. In an asynchronous class, it is the digital presence of the teacher that gains the importance. And the teacher has to ensure that the students have no other choice but to interact with the digital presence of the teacher. However, the only exception in this case, in terms of what I talked about charisma and I talked about the reason to respect, are the hard sciences, medicine, engineering. Those are exceptions to this discussion at this point. Now, I'm going to make two profound statements to answer the question and as we move along. The need for the teacher, not a teacher, the teacher, was never so critical as it is today. Number two, without them, the youth would drown in the information vortex. Now, this will be the basis of my talk today. Now, when I talk of the teacher, let me try and explain a bit because that is very important. See, the teacher has to think of them, the teacher has to think of themselves, him or her, as investment managers. Not many do that. In fact, I have not met any who does that. The reason is that the student is investing the time, money, future, effort, and trust in them. And the least they expect is a decent rate of return. And we all know what happens when the investment manager does not provide that rate of return. Then the question comes up in the mind of the students, why do I need a teacher? Because the teacher is not providing the rate of return. It is not only just a vocational duty, I think it is also a moral duty of the teacher when the students are investing their trust and their faith in the teacher. The second thing that the teacher should look like is somebody who makes sure that one teacher plus 15 students does not mean 1 plus 15. It means 16. So it's not a class of 1 plus 15, it's a class of 16 teachers. Those teachers, those 16 of them are engaging in a co-generative dialogue. They are co-constructing knowledge. They are creating new knowledge. There is multilateral interaction between the students and with the teacher. So, I mean, all this is very easy to say, easily done in a face-to-face. But when it comes to asynchronous, which is now a very large part of what is happening, it is a very difficult concept to actually implement. The second statement I'm making is without them, without the teacher, the youth would drown in the information vortex. And let's see what I mean by that. Now, information vortex is created by the information overload available in the vast ocean of the so-called knowledge. We all know what a vortex is. I hope none of us has been in it because it's impossible to survive without outside help. And as you can see in the picture on the right, that outside help sometimes is known as the Kisby ring. It is also known as the Perry boy. It is also known as a lifesaver. But somebody has to throw that to you and then pull you out. Now, that the teacher is the one who will do this for you and get you out of the information vortex. And here is what I mean, basically. See, the first thing that the teacher has to do for you to get out of that information overload vortex and help you from not drowning is to make you understand, is to make the students understand that knowledge is not something out there to grab. It's all information out there, but it's not knowledge. So just don't go out fishing and trying to, put a hook here and there and then see what you see is what you get, but just don't pick it up. It's not, it doesn't go by volumes or by weight. It goes by content, by different things. Second, see the huge volume of information which looks like knowledge gives a false sense of informational security. And that is a trap. Students feel that they are secure with all the information. And that is where the teacher comes in and tells them that this is a trap. Don't fall for it. Third thing is, who is going to verify and validate the information that is all out there? Google, Wikipedia, or any other information providing platform only provides information. They do not validate it. They don't stand behind it. They don't say whether it's right or wrong. They just say, this is what we asked for. This is what we have available. Who sent it? Who wrote it? Who put it? That's not their problem. So that is where the teacher comes in. The veracity and the validity of that information to become knowledge has to be important. And very important, more than that, is to make sure as to how that information will work in the context of those students. And that is where I believe differentiated instructions comes into play. Without that context, and we'll talk about context, in the next slide also. Without that context, the student will not know as to which of the information fits in where in the puzzle. And that is where the teacher comes into play. Then the teacher is not managing the information. The teacher is creating new information, is creating new knowledge. The time of managing knowledge is gone. It is the time to co-create knowledge. Without that, the question will be asked, why do we need teachers? And then, obviously, to do all this, the teacher has to act like a designer. So the design role of a teacher will always exist. In fact, more the information out there, more these problems, and more important is the design role of the teacher. So, more the merrier. Let there be much more information. The teacher's role is safe. This question will never be asked about the teacher. It might be asked about a teacher. So let's go further. And I was talking about the context. What is the possibility that an uncut diamond could on its own become an angular cut polished diamond, which is marketable and which is much in demand? Maybe one in a million. But do you want to take that chance? Nobody does. And I'm sure even you won't. Then look at the alphabets in there. The alphabets, I count all the information out there is like these alphabets. Now, what is the possibility that if you picked up the alphabets, threw them in the air, let them fall down, that they might become a word? Hardly any. What is the possibility that if you picked up those words, threw them up, they came down and they became paragraphs? Hardly any. What is the possibility or probability that you pick up those paragraphs, throw them up in the air, they come down, and they become a book? Hardly. So, do you want that to happen with the information you see out there? Don't you want the book? Don't you want to be that diamond, angular cut with total internal reflection? And that is the beauty of a diamond. It is cut in a way where the light is not able, it does not really come out. It just keeps on reflecting inside the surface of the diamond. That is why the total internal reflection is very high. So let's go further. What does the diamond cutter, in this case, the teacher, need to have to create the perfect marketable diamond? Or what does the author, in this case, the teacher, need to have to write a well-received marketable book? So looking at these and then going further, I will talk about two tools that the teachers need as a diamond cutter or as an author. But then what does the diamond cutter and the author have in common with the teacher? One, they both know the outcome. Second, they know the process that they're going to go through. Third, they know the tools that they will need and how to use them. Fourth, they know the problems that might come up and how to go around them. And fifth, they can contextualize the whole process and get to somewhere in a particular timeline, in a particular way, and in a particular, let's say, particular budget. And the reason, all this is very, very nice when you talk about, outcome-based education, the OBE, and that is why I'm a very strong proponent of OBE. But that is for a different case altogether. So let's go further. I talked about two tools, right? The first tool I talk about that the teacher must have is the teaching philosophy statement. And again, you'll be surprised, as I was. Very limited number of teachers, even in higher education, teachers who have been teaching for 40 years, have not really submitted their teaching philosophy statements or have not really written down their teaching philosophy statements or do not regularly update them as they have gone through in life. Maybe some do, maybe 10% do, 15%, I don't know. But a very large number of them do not do that. And not many universities require teachers in higher education to write down a teaching philosophy statement and submit it to the university as part of their hiring program. When I talk to people, I tell them this is what has to be done, this is what should be done. Because without a teaching philosophy or without the teacher knowing the teaching philosophy, you really never know where the teacher is going with whatever you're doing. And this again, becomes part of the OBE. But anyway, and in this case, I'm sort of, taken more into the thing by Carla Loya. And, the diagram I'm sharing with you right now is basically, based on that. A teaching philosophy statement is like a paradigm where you look at everything through the teaching philosophy statement. So it's like a colored lens, basically. It has 4 sections: ontology, epistemology, axiology, and methodology. So let me spend a couple of minutes, looking at each one of them. Now, ontology is what is around us and how do we interpret it. It is our view of the world, or the worldview, as you may call it. The question in this that we should ask ourselves is, who am I as an instructor, and what is my role in this whole thing? Who are my students, and what about them should I consider in planning my teaching and my assessments? How can I create spaces where everyone is engaged, not just those who are confident and well prepared? And we all know, if it's a large class, you'll have 10% of such people. If it's a small class, maybe 20% of such people who are confident and prepared, but others are not. And how can I teach and assess in ways that recognize and value different ways of knowing? So, this is ontology. Epistemology is basically our understanding of what counts as knowledge and how it is created. Now, the question we need to ask is the content representative of the students' identities? Are all the students expected to and given opportunities not only to receive knowledge but also to create and construct knowledge? Are the pedagogies, like the learning content, the learning activities, the assignments, the assessments, are they all very flexible so that they can include many ways of knowing? This is what we should be looking at when we are talking about epistemology as part of the teaching process statement. Third is the axiology, which is our ethics and values, what we consider valuable. The question we need to ask to write a teaching philosophy statement under this heading: how are my own values part of or not part of my instruction? Should they be? Should they not be? If so, how? How are my students' values part of or not part of my instruction? Should they be or should they not be? If so, how? Are my students given equal opportunities to thrive? Am I being fair to them? And am I using the authority to empower my students to take responsible part in the learning and creation of knowledge process? The fourth part is the methodology, which is how we transmit and acquire knowledge. The question we need to ask is, does my pedagogy, which is content, activity, assignments, and assessments, does it support all students? Does it empower students to individually engage with each other and engage with the teacher? Do they recognize and incorporate my students' lived experiences and their needs? Do they provide multiple ways and varied ways for the students to interact between themselves and with the teacher? And how can I gauge if I have empowered my students to contribute in the shared creation of knowledge? Now, this, as I said, is tool 1. And without this tool, I really at a loss to really understand as to how can a teacher really do justice in higher education and sort of convince the university that the teaching philosophy is in line with the university's own policy guidelines. The second aspect of which I talk about is the second tool is the teaching presence concept, which is part of the community of inquiry model. Now, we all know teaching presence is part of the community of inquiry, which other two presences are social and cognitive, and it's a section of these 3 circles. But my take on this is a bit different. I believe that teaching presence is not only one of the circles, but it is a catalyst that makes sure that the social and the cognitive presence interact faster, deeper, stronger, and give better results. Therefore, it's also a catalyst. And my theory, I won't say a theory, but my observation has not been shared by I've not seen any other researchers say that, but there may be some. But I also take support from the authors themselves when they define teaching presence as the design, facilitation, and direction of cognitive and social processes for the purpose of achieving personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning outcomes. So, I guess what I'm saying is right about this being a catalyst. But then, what is teaching presence? It is a state of mind, just like quality is a state of mind. Teaching presence is a state of mind. It is not just something on paper, it is a state of mind of the teacher. But it has three elements. And teaching presence starts even before planning the course. It has three elements. The design and organization is one, which is design and structure organization of the curriculum, the most important part of teaching presence. Facilitation of discourse is the second element of teaching presence, and direct instruction is the third element, which is the least in terms of percentages, if you want to apply a percentage of that. Now, the design and organization of the course is something in which the teacher's teaching philosophy has to be involved in. And that is where at times I sort of come up with discussion with instructional designers, because they design courses for teachers to teach, but then the course is being designed based on whose teaching philosophy statement. So that sort of a contradiction can come up. But I guess this is the need of the hour. This is the requirement of today's educational infrastructure. Without that, it's not possible to move forward. So there we go. Can we have the next poll, please?
Yes, absolutely. This is the question 2. What percentage of higher education instructors understand, internalize, and implement the concepts of teaching presence? Dr. Bhatty, one of the audience actually wants you to go back to the slide quickly. And then, okay, great. Okay, I'm showing the results. 53% of the percentage of the audience have answered 25%.
Okay, now, again, I am sorry to say, but that is the reality that during my research, because it was on teaching presence, I talked to hundreds of teachers, on the pretty high level, not all for the research, but just sharing ideas and talks, and more than 75% really did not understand the concepts of teaching presence. They had heard of the community of inquiry model. They knew that there were three circles there and all that sort. But they had never really taken the trouble of going into the teaching presence and sort of understanding what it's all about. And the problem came up when because of COVID, a lot of teachers had to go to asynchronous. Then came the problem, because without teaching presence understanding, asynchronous courses cannot be as efficient as face-to-face. In fact, asynchronous can be more efficient than face-to-face if designed properly with teaching presence concept. Now, let me go to the next slide. And about teaching presence, let's talk about teaching presence. Now, teaching presence is not the same as teacher presence. The reason I say this is that, I'm a reviewer for American Journal for Distance Education and also reviewer for American Educational Research Association. And in those articles, when I review, I find that there are researchers even today using teaching presence and teacher presence as interchangeably, as if they mean the same. They do not mean the same. Teacher presence is more in terms of the physical aspect, the reactive part of it, something that is being done in terms of being responsible or to make sure that students on the other side are able to know what they want, to get what they want, and that you are there for them. But teacher presence is not part of the pre-planning process. Teaching presence, on the other hand, is part of the pre-planning process. It's a state of mind. Teacher presence is not a state of mind. Teaching presence is a state of mind. And that is the importance of teaching presence and this small error. So imagine even today, if this error is there, so, I believe that what I've seen is that teachers do not take the trouble of trying to get into this aspect of it. And I think instructional designers should also, I believe they do more of it. I'm told that that this is part of their curriculum when they get certified for instructional design. So I'm sure they're better than teachers in this particular aspect of teaching presence. But however, if in terms of teaching presence, the teacher needs to look at four roles. Think of a conductor of an orchestra. That is what a teacher is doing when creating a teaching presence. Think of a curator of a museum. Think of a choreographer in a theater. And think of the teacher being part of the student's digital experience. If you think of these things, you'll understand what teaching presence really is all about. Now, having said that, I found this a pretty nice diagram which covers almost all teaching presence qualities except the last two. The number 10, which is geek, and number 8, which is technology enthusiast. These I would associate more with hardcore sciences, with computer sciences and with other sciences. But all the others are typically something that a teaching presence means to the students and to the teachers. This is all the teacher must be to be acceptable to the students of today. And this is what a teacher looks like. So the teacher has to be compatible with the students, not the other way around. But strangely enough, even today we have teachers who believe in that philosophy. So Barack Obama once said, and I really loved his quote, "For the world has changed and we must change with it." Now, what does that mean when we talk about, in terms of academia, in terms of the students? The students need to understand, and teachers need to make them understand, that in today's world, a paper degree certifying the knowledge level that they have is not enough. In my days, that was okay, but not now. In today's world, the product has to be cut out as a trainable, thus a marketable product, with transferable real-life skills and including soft skills. That is the change in the world today. And to get there, it requires lived experiences of the teacher. It requires the teachers to go with differentiated instructions. It requires the teachers to ensure using the COI model, employing co-generative dialogue, and creating teaching presence to get all the results that they want to have, to produce people who will be trainable, thus marketable with the transferable skills, and the mission of long life learning that is equally important. Here we can see a very nice comparative slide. The audio cassette of the 70s was good marketability with zero marketability. On the right, you can see I'm studying for a degree to improve my marketability. Really? I mean, not really. Basically, we just talked about it. So the transferable skill on the left is something that people need to have. And we all know that, self-management, critical thinking, team working, communication, information handling. These are basically things that you need, in today's world to succeed. And therefore, you need a teacher to do that. And that is where I sum up now. The teacher with the right tools are definitely needed. And here's why. There's always a question, why do we need this? Students of today ask this much more than before. And many of the lessons fail because they don't adequately address this important question. The teacher can tell them, why does it need this? The right context. And again, same thing on the right side, just reiterate that without context, these are just dots. And nothing will work with the dots. A dot can float in your brain with a lot of other dots and doesn't mean a thing. Knowledge is information in context, connecting the dots. And the information in context can be put in the right perspective, in the right context, with the verified and validated information, making sure that you don't drown in the vortex of the so-called knowledge out there. You need the teacher with the right tools, which I said was at least a teaching philosophy statement to be acted upon and to be updated on a regular basis, and the concept of teaching presence, the use of community inquiry model, and all that sort of stuff. And with this, I close my talk, and I will stop sharing my screen. And thank you very much for being there and listening to me. And I can now take questions once
Yeah.
I have stopped sharing my screen, so I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's fine. I will just share with you some of the questions. Amelia have asked, what are your suggestions for teacher engagement in the asynchronous courses where students tend to not want to interact?
You see, that is a huge question, and that is the biggest problem teachers have today. And as I said before, that the use of the concept of teaching presence, which are very important, and I'll give you a practical form of some of those things. In asynchronous pedagogy, the biggest form of interaction is the design of the curriculum, the structure of the curriculum. And as I said in one sentence, the student should have no option but to interact with the digital presence of the teacher. The teacher presence is 24 hours a day, round the clock with the student. And here are some things that are important. For example, discussion boards are a very important part of asynchronous pedagogy. However, my point is that discussion boards are the least effectively used tools in an asynchronous discussion. The reason is that the discussion boards are being used mechanically. Post one original, respond to two, and that's it, you're done. That is not what a discussion board is for. The discussion board is a real time analysis of what the students think about the topic that is being discussed. A discussion board, if handled properly and analyzed and guided properly with the right questions in the right timing and a context which the students can understand, you have to make them come back and be part of the discussion board, not just because one original and two responses are good enough. That's not the point. The discussion boards are the most effective tools that are extremely important. They have to be used over and over again. They have to be used in a very creative manner. The questions have to be probing. The students need to be able to put in critical thinking in the discussion board. The teacher has to make sure that the teacher is not running the discussion board, is just monitoring it and getting involved with the right booster rocket to move the trajectory left or right, depending on where they are going at that point. So that is extremely important. So the teacher's presence has to be there, but the teacher should not run the discussion board, and that is something which is very important. And I cannot stress that enough. The second thing in an asynchronous is the importance of question and answer forums. Now, many teachers have question and answer forums, but when the question is there, they are not available to answer the question. For example, a teacher may say, for example, a question and answer forum needs to have a turnaround time. The student should know that if I put a question today, it will be answered if it's a weekday within 8 hours. If it's a weekend, maybe 24 hours. And then the teacher has to own up to that time frame. The students, when they feel that the teacher is part of them, the teacher is owning up to them, the teacher is trying to be responsible for what they're learning, for what they're doing, that is where question and answer forums, they thrive and they give results. In most cases, they fail because teachers use it just as one of the one of those boxes out there where people can put in the thing. The third thing that teachers need to do in terms of in asynchronous pedagogy, you see, if you have a proper discussion board and if you are monitoring it right, it will show you exactly the difference between a responsible student, an irresponsible student, a transactional student, and a student who is just there to get a degree, a paper, or nothing else. So that is something that you need to be able to point out pretty early in the session. If you cannot do that, then you're wasting your time trying to look at students and their work who are transactional students, and you can see that. So there comes the concept of differentiated instruction. So you see, all these things are in fact interrelated, and it's a full topic by itself. I mean, I can do a webinar just on this particular aspect of teaching presence, and how can that help in asynchronous, because my whole dissertation was primarily based on asynchronous pedagogy.
Good. Rajakta, if I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, I have asked what's your view of the workload that typical teachers are made to shoulder with teaching presence. And she also has asked how is teaching presence in online course different from in-person courses, and would it be possible for you to share some strategies to increase our own teaching presence? We have only 5 minutes. I would appreciate if you
Sure.
just answer.
Okay, now see, the thing is that I agree that the workload on teachers is quite a lot, and with all the assignments and with all the teaching content that has to be sort of prepared, and then assessments. Uh, but then we have to understand that teaching or instruction, as I said before, is not a 9 to 5 job. Teaching is a vocation, not just a job. So therefore, you have to be in teaching if you really love teaching and you want to really give to the society something that you believe in, you are capable of giving. So that is the first principle of teaching. Now, if teaching is a 9 to 5 job, then yes, of course, everything will be a lot of load, but I also believe and I also agree that people have families, they have their personal life. So there has to be a balance. I understand that part as well. Now, the thing is that when teaching presence becomes a state of mind, then it becomes easier. When you are trying to apply teaching presence as something from the outside onto a course, then that becomes difficult. But if teaching presence is part of the course design of the structure, as I was talking about, for example, in terms of the critical evaluation of the article or the video, the way the assessments have been designed, the way the assignments have been designed, and the time frame, and and the 2 and 4, the question and answer forum, the discussion boards, and the teachers, interpersonal communication, with the student. It's a lot. I mean, I cannot tell you how to manage that time, because that time is to manage between your family and your own personal space and the concept of teaching presence. But what I can tell you is, and this is where our issues when I have nothing against instructional designers, but when instructional designers design a master course, the problem is that each teacher then has to try and put teaching presence in the course itself, which is much more difficult than putting teaching presence when it's your mind and your course and your design. So that becomes an issue for a lot of teachers in trying to teach master courses. And but there's no solution to it for the time being. So all I can say is be familiar with the concept of teaching presence, read as much as you want about it, try and practice it. But as I said, we can have a separate session on teaching presence itself, just teaching presence. And I already have done presentations at UPenn and other universities just on teaching presence itself.
Yeah, we have only 2 minutes left. If anyone has any quick. One of the audience also I have asked about if you know any research about mindfulness in education.
No, I'm sorry, I do not. I have not seen research about mindfulness.
And also, Afshin Akbar do you have any suggestion on how to get students interact for a skill-based asynchronous course?
Well, for a skill-based asynchronous course? Yes, I mean, you see the skill-based course is primarily what you call outcome-based education. It's a course where at the end they need to perform certain skills to justify that they have passed the course. All that I talked about even in a skill-based course, you need to have projects, you need to have discussions, you need to have groups, you need to have all that thing. But the teacher has to stay on top of all this. And again, course design. In fact, I'm reviewing a course right now for quality matters, and in that course, this is exactly the same issue. The skill-based course has to be again depend on the design of the course. It's all about design of the course, where you can build in teaching presence in the structure, in the discourse, in the right instruction. So it's very difficult to be able to sort of point out one or two things just like that. It's more of you're getting involved into it. As I said, it's a state of mind. It's not something you can take from outside and put it in the pot like like salt or something. It's something which is in the mix itself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bhatty, for your great, wonderful presentation. And also, I see that the audience have interacted very effectively and shared some useful information for other audience as well, like Marta and others. Thank you very much for attending. Do we really need teachers? Today's student ask sessions, and I think we are running out of time, and I wish you all the best. And thank you very much again for your presentation and for interacting very well. Yeah, this is the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, all of you. And if you want to get to me, you know how to get hold of me. If not,
yeah,
if you not get hold of Behi, and she'll get hold of me.